percent.
To library?
Or to float?
To Odyssey, through Odyssey. Yeah, they've got a 2-hour limit to auto transfer. There's like 3 different things they caught us on, so that we lost a bunch because of the 2-hour limitation, and then there was 2 more little things that could stop a video from going, and we ended up with, like, I think when I finally went into our Odyssey catalog, we had like less than 50 videos out of like 600.
Oh,
Huh.
I didn't know that.
But I found a guy who's going to do it all manually for us, which is
Oh,
amazing.
nice.
So he's going to do it manually to all of them. But that was the problem, is because I got all excited with the auto transfer, but then when I went in, there's only like 50 videos there.
It's not man from content safe, or is it's somebody else that does it?
What's that?
Yeah, it's somebody else. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's just a friend of a show.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I downloaded or I created an account on Float on my laptop, but I was having trouble finding the app in the App Store. Do you know if it's on iOS or
no? It's all
not on iOS.
No, it's all mobile responsive. They have no app as of yet in iOS or Android.
Wait, Float doesn't? Yeah, they do.
They have an iOS app?
Oh, not iOS. They're for Android.
Oh, Android. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have it for Android, but yeah, maybe they don't have it for Apple. But so same thing with the Odyssey. Odyssey has a library app that you can get, but they don't have a Odyssey app, even though I think they're pushing Odyssey kind of as the go-to. That whole thing can be a little complicated,
but
yeah.
All right, guys, what do you say? Let's get the show on the road.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Start talking about probing.
All right, hey, we're back. Union of the Unwanted, big UFO show. Holy moly. Ricky, what says you?
What's up, everybody? Yes, the last one of the year. And I'm kind of glad you guys came up with this idea. Sam, Charlie, and Mike came up kind of with this idea of doing a ET supernatural UFO show. I think a lot of us do have COVID fatigue by now, so it'd be nice to kind of end it on a lighter note. But even this topic can get super interesting and go down some serious rabbit holes. So, but thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody who participates. And so, Mike, I know you have a clip that maybe you want to start off with, and we can kind of go from there and expand on that. Do you want to go to that now, or do you want to wait? Or?
Hold on, midnight. Hold on.
Yeah.
If you play this clip, are we going to go to jail for 10 years?
No, I don't think so. I'm only playing the audio, so hopefully they won't get us on that. But
okay, perfect.
This clip is from NBC News, and this is the headline. Former Israeli space security chief says extraterrestrials exist and Trump knows about them. So here's a quick 2-minute piece on that, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards.
Aliens exist and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said the aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are. NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
Hi, Alison. Well, this is quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years. Not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected, at least until now. And he said all this in an interview with an Israeli newspaper in Hebrew, but it's really taken off after parts of it were published in English by the Jerusalem Post today. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, I've got nothing to lose. Well, so far, President Trump has not tweeted about this, though remember a year ago, he did set up the Space Force as the fifth branch of the US Armed Forces. Well, we did ask the White House, the Department of Defense, and Israeli officials to comment. So far, they have not responded to the NBC News request, and I wonder if they ever will. Alison.
Space Force.
All right. That is it. I don't know where to start there. So
They didn't mention that he has a book coming out. Wasn't that part of the deal?
They didn't plug his book. No.
Do you think they were waiting to see how many people voted for Biden? Do you think that's what they were waiting for?
It could be.
I think we're living in interesting times. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on. You have the the UFO disclosure stuff coming out. Then you have the black pill cool guy with the Project Blue Beam. So it's interesting. And, for me, man, I think sometimes it could easily be all of it, right? There could be aliens and there could be Project Blue Beam all at the same time. And for me, man, I'm a realm guy. I've always been a realm guy. And for me, I don't know if they're necessarily aliens from another planet. My belief is interdimensional, people from different dimensions, which fits in for me with, that clip you played, Midnight Mike, where they talking about made a deal with the U.S. government. Wasn't the whole thing Eisenhower that, you just can't take everybody. You can take anybody who wanders into this forest. You can jack them, do whatever weird kind of things you want to them and their rectums, and that's our deal.
Wait, which forest?
All of them.
Just about any national
It's been a long winter. No.
Missing 411. Have you ever done a show on that one, Chrissy? It's like
No.
really interesting stuff right
I've
there.
been meaning
about
to.
How like all the disappearing people have so much in common, well educated, German background.
Oh shit, that's me. Well, except for the well-educated part. Somewhat educated.
It's interesting stuff, man. I don't know who wants to kick it off, but I think it's like 2020 is a year like they just said all the conspiracies are gonna come out, all of them all at the same time, and aliens are one of them, man. Yeah. I think it's very interesting stuff.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I wish it was coming from somebody besides NBC News, a former Israeli military guy. I mean, was John Brennan not available for this story? Because this is kind of like the least trustworthy sources of information. That being said, I'm totally and completely open-minded to the idea of aliens or interdimensional beings and all of that. And I think that can exist. And look, you can look back to, ancient texts and the Vedic documents and paintings that have uninteresting things. There's a lot to dig into, why is it that in the city of London, they're obsessed with lizards and reptilians and they've got statues everywhere of dragons and shit? There's a lot there, but boy, I mean, NBC News and the Israeli government, sorry. I don't know.
To be fair to NBC News, a lot of news outlets picked it up. It was an interview with the Jerusalem Post, and everyone ran with it.
Yeah, no, I know that. I know.
Well, hearing it on NBC kind of reminded me of that one time that Hillary was on the Tonight Show or one of those shows, and she was like, "Well, when I'm president, we'll talk about the aliens," and then she lost. But then, after the fact, she those Podesta emails, which were not supposed to be public. They were talking about that stuff. They're like, oh, we got to talk to the benevolent ones, blah, blah, blah. And I don't really think that was supposed to be public. So I'd say it's about half fake, half real in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm not. The aliens like pizza?
They love it.
They love it.
Maybe some of them.
I don't know.
I don't trust anything that's going to come out of the government, our media, anything like that. And 2020 was a year where they kicked off like mass shit ton of conspiracies that some may be true, some are not, but there's so much disinformation and confusion going on. And I think especially with this UFO thing, I think they're trying to gear us up for something. They got the Space Force. Now they're talking about UFOs in the media, the Tic Tac thing. It's just not, it doesn't seem right to me that these sources that we're getting this information from is just all of us a sudden going to say, yep, okay, aliens are real. We have these off-planet exotic materials that we're going to present. You know, the Pentagon's coming out with this information. I just don't, I don't trust it. I don't trust the information where it's coming from. Now, whether they'll be building up to some sort of fakery that they're going to induce or they know something is going to happen, I don't know. You know, I've had my own personal experience. It wasn't like an abduction or contact experience, typical one, but I have had an experience, and it wasn't, you know, being taken away in a craft or anything like that.
Well, you might as well tell us.
Was it your anus? Was it anal oriented?
It wasn't anal oriented.
Show us your anus.
I don't think we want to go there.
The mark of the beast.
No, it was more of a. It was a meditation contact experience. I was meditating, and I came into contact with another intelligence that gave me information, and incredible feelings of love that I've never felt on my living existence on this planet. And that's how I knew just the way that it was communicating, instantaneous psychic communication of things that I had no idea about. I would ask the question, receive the answer immediately. It was all done through a deep meditation session. And it was basically an intelligence that was not human. And I'm still unpacking the whole incident. But it just gave me a lot of information about some fucked up things that are going on, of course, around the planet, and that each and every one of us has our jobs to do, and that we're doing it right now with these microphones and, you know, things along those lines. But it was a very, very profound experience, and it happened 2 or 3 days in a row, and I couldn't deny it because it there was a few other things that came along with it that kind of gave me confirmation of it.
Were you like an advanced like meditation person at this point? Like
at this point, I was getting there. I had not gone as deep. This was the first time I've gone as deep as I went. I was practicing, and this time I finally let go of a lot of fear and just went as deep as I could go. And my consciousness started traveling. I could tell it definitely was some sort of like astral travel or something like that.
See, and this is what the media won't talk about, is this like an amazing experience. So if you were communicating with something, you seem to be, you know, acknowledging that much. Going back to the idea of whether this is like propaganda on one end, completely fake, or completely true, I don't think we can afford to pigeonhole ourselves into either or. We know the world is much more mysterious than it's simply this, it's simply that. However, I will say I'll be damned if I ever see the media, even if they're truthful about UFOs, I'll be damned if I see them talking about this self-realization, this internal exploration, because in my opinion, it's precisely what they don't really seem to really want that. They don't really seem to promote that type of inner.
They leave that part out.
Yeah.
They want the nuts and
Precisely.
bolts.
Yeah, ever notice how any kind of self-help book is immediately like, even if it's in a self-help category, that comes with a stigma, and that especially if you're a dude, you can't touch any of that stuff.
Right.
And I think it's sort of like spirituality is kind of shamed in a way in our culture.
That's exactly it, which is why like things like, I mean, UFOs, like it's not only nuts and bolts, in my opinion, as evidenced by your story right there, and by a multitude of stories.
I actually think like 90% of the stuff we see in the sky is our own military shit.
Yeah, very well could be. It very well could be. And that's the other side where, you know, the individuals arguing the all blue being thing, you know, they'd say, well, it's ideal to convince us that it's, you know, military technology, convince us that it's aliens or something otherworldly to divert attention from the, you know, exotic craft up there. It's probably a mixture of both, but I guarantee you there's probably a lot more going on up there than, you know, we're actually privy to now. Some of it being quite unnerving, I imagine, especially with the advent of the space warfare. We don't know, but there's a lot more going on up there for sure. I'm confident about that much. See how much we get out of them from it, though.
Yeah, there's also religiously, you know, the Catholics, right, or the Romans, like took a lot of the books that involved, you know, aliens. out of the Bible, all those stories and all that stuff. And I find that very interesting, man. I find the whole thing very interesting because, you know, the whole game is that we are, you know, specks of shit on a rock hurling through space.
A pale blue dot.
Yeah, right. And that's really what they want us to believe. And, you know, and I forget who I was talking to, but man, you know, they talked about how, you know, we're entering this age of Aquarius. And I don't know if we talked about this memory hole, but about, you know, that a big part of like this movement is to transhumanism is the new religion and scientism is the new religion, and how they're really trying to push us into you know, basically trying to trap us into this realm. That the whole thing is that, you know, there's these people made you know, deals. I personally, a lot of people call the Anunnaki aliens. I personally believe they're low frequency demons that made deals with you know, certain families here and created Nephilim, you know, and you see that in the Hillary Clinton emails. Where are the Nephilim?
Oh yeah,
where you
that's
buried
right.
that shit, right? That's what they were
Forgot about that.
talking about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
No, go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what is aliens other than like peak technology, right? They'll leave out the spiritual side, the dimensional side of it, if there should be, and it's peak technology. It's precisely what they'd want for a transhumanist agenda. So not only that, but it's an overwhelming sense of hopelessness too. It's something that's much more powerful than us that we really don't have any control over, which has been acknowledged. So I mean, mix that with everything that's going on. You know, there's a lot of powerlessness going on. So whether we like to say it or not, whether it's on purpose or not, there's some major, you know, psyops going on. I hate to say like a cliche term, but our minds are being heavily messed with right now, whether it's through the natural release of true information that's just mind blowing. Our overton window is shifting. 2020 really is a banger of a year, and I've never seen anything like it. Obviously I'm young, but I don't know if any year will top this again. But yeah, aliens, peak technology. They're worshiping technology. You see this religious doctrine coming out. They treat science as a religion. There's been a turn recently. You went from loving religion, or excuse me, science. You went from loving science to worshiping it. You cannot question it. But
it's the new God. It's trust the science is like, that's listen to your dad. You know what I mean? It's the new I'm your daddy and no more questions. Trust the science.
And it's like, what's science but questions and debating, and innovation comes from these heated debates over time. I mean, we used to have a different understanding of the universe, and people were killed for that until it was proven that guy was right. You know, I mean, you wouldn't get there if you weren't asking questions. So there's something very wrong about these people that are pushing just science alone. There's a whole entirely different element. And forbidden knowledge, your story like that, there's an entirely different layer of this under the surface that I don't know if they'll allow us to know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of agree with Sam on these realms. You know, there may be aliens coming here in tin cans from other galaxies, who knows? But I think that there are these other spectrums just beyond our vision, filled, teeming with life that we can't see, and these entities can interact with us whenever they want. I think that they have the ability to possibly cause what one could call an abduction experience, but it's just some kind of conscious experience that they're having. I think what they're doing right now, they want to keep us looking outward, out into the sky, towards this technology, worshiping this technology, instead of looking inward, because I think to really access these hidden realms that they don't want us to know about is through your consciousness, is through inward, and is learning more about yourself and what is going on right outside the spectrum of your vision. Because I think these things are here, and I think they always have been, at least most of them. That's my opinion.
Well, then the question is, is this misdirection, like you said, pointing up when they should be pointing down? You know,
right,
is there something?
It could be.
There's that too. I mean, I've done enough ayahuasca and DMT and mushrooms and everything to realize that there is a world beyond your eyeballs. You know, there are different layers to this existence, and if you're operating under the assumption that the only thing that is real is what you can see with your eyeballs, well, then you're severely limiting yourself. You're almost blind in this sense, because we've got ultraviolet and, you know, and a large frequency band that we that we can't see in. But you know, ask your cat. You see why your cat freaks out sometimes when there's something in, you know, it feels like it's seeing something in the room. We have to get over this belief that we have all of the senses and they're all operating at maximum capacity. And if we don't see it or smell it or feel it, then it doesn't exist. It's very arrogant of us to think like that. And I wonder, and I've always wondered this, I feel like religion has done extra work to suppress any of that from people. They don't want you thinking about, they want to be the only game in town. They want to keep you focused on them and not even considering the possibility that there are aliens or interdimensional entities that you can interact with. Because if you come to know that, then their books become obsolete. Their books become like, yeah, well, you're part of this, but you're not the only game in town. And so let's not fool ourselves into thinking that the religious institutions don't have a vested interest in keeping everybody dumbed down and unaware of these things. So it's like, on the one hand, you've got the CIA and these people starting to play up the alien thing. And then you've got the religious component saying, I don't know what you're talking about. We're the only game, you know, don't listen to that. That's the devil.
Demons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't you also make the argument of the because the thing is about the religious people, anybody who's religious, one thing they all have in common, even if they disagree with like specifics, is they all believe in supernatural. They believe in spirituality, supernatural, healing, things beyond our understanding. So I think, and you could even make the case that it's the opposite is the concern, is the fact that they want us not to be religious or spiritual or believe in the supernatural. They want us to believe in science, that this is the only thing, like everything's black or white, you know, everything you can touch, smell, see, that's the only thing that exists, and everything else is bullshit. And I think
have you noticed the infighting in the UFO community? I mean, it's either nuts or bolts or metaphysical. They don't want to coexist and study each other and come together and study both at the same time. They want the two separated. So I think that's where the answer lies, somewhere in between, and they don't want us going there.
Just want to mention that. Yeah, the community seems very divided. The ones with the nuts and bolts, they want evidence for all this stuff. You know, their UAP task force has to come up with all this evidence, but they're ignoring all the consciousness aspect of it. And they think that anyone talking about that should be, you know, it shouldn't be counted. How can you just throw that all in the bucket? I mean, we've been studying this for 10, 20 years, looking at for disclosure, all that kind of stuff. And now that it's coming, it's almost, you could argue that it's here, because I always thought disclosure was not the government, but the media and the scientific community to acknowledge the mystery. That was it. Just acknowledge that it's there and we need to study it more. Yeah. You know, and now it's here. I don't believe any of it. I can't believe, I believe my friend who I go out and CE5 with and look and try and make contact. And I wasn't there the day he had a download and he can see the energy lines of the earth and the invisible realm that you guys are talking about, full of entities, and a trip to the spacecraft and all this. I believe him more than anything I see in the media or the so-called scientific community that wants to be able to measure the stuff that you can't even measure. How are you even going to confirm all these things? Like you just can't do it.
Yeah, there's an overall conditioning for us to not trust ourselves and our peers. It's like, don't trust your own body to heal itself. Don't trust your own body to fight off a virus. Like, don't trust yourself to rely on herbs or healthy eating to be healthy. No, you have to rely on science, big pharma, big tech, even, to know how to cure yourself or what to do when you have symptoms. And same thing, like divide. UFO community, any community they can divide, I think they're finding a way so that, and then you trickle in the UFO stuff. It's like, okay, they're seeing how we all react to like masks and the virus stuff, who's complying, who's following along. And maybe they're trickling in the UFO info so that they can kind of like start to steer the narrative.
Yeah.
I think,
oh, sorry, go on. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, to me, it all comes down to the idea of consciousness. Like, even when you're arguing over nuts and bolts UFO versus spiritual UFOs or something, like, it's kind of funny. The same argument is happening in the Bigfoot community, because even with something like Bigfoot, there's people arguing whether it's an animal or like a paranormal shape-shifting thing,
or human.
Oh, that's just Larry. He's drunk.
But like in general, the consensus is with UFOs and with Bigfoot, it's kind of both. Like they can leave footprints, they can leave
Banding marks
from the UFO. I don't know. Like there can be physical evidence, but there's a higher component or a consciousness component. And even like when you dig up the CIA documents or hear the whistleblowers, they say even to steer a UFO, you have to use consciousness. So the consciousness thing is really key for the whole spectrum.
Well, I want to mention something too, because I put this in my first book. It's a conversation between Jan Harzan, who's the head of MUFON, and Ben Rich, who's the head of Lockheed Skunk Works. And Ben Rich gave this presentation at UCLA in '94, I think. And Jan Harzan was there in the room as an engineer. And Ben Rich said, and by the way, Skunk Works is the exotic technology component of Lockheed Martin. It's the space,
probably the biggest aircraft manufacturer in the world, probably.
Yeah.
Right. And so Ben Rich is saying we have the technology to take ET home and it won't take us a lifetime to do it. And so Jan Harzan follows him out to the parking lot and says, I'm an engineer. I have a question. I have a follow-up question that apparently nobody in the audience asked because they're just like, okay, yeah, you can take ET home, but I don't have a follow-up question. So he says, I'm interested in the propulsion. Can you explain to me how it works? And Ben Rich's response to him was a question back. He says, well, do you know how ESP works? And he goes, I don't know. All points in time and space are connected. And Ben Rich goes, that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So nothing to do with Reese's Pieces.
Apparently not. What a disappointment. I was going to say, you can see the aspect of, and look at where we're moving towards now, where, there's this is an older article, but there is, take two examples, in my opinion. You can take Elon Musk's neural link, where you're using consciousness as a form of controlling a physical piece of technology. On the military application side of it, you can, there was an article about eventually they're moving towards this idea of like fighter pilots controlling the control panel, controlling the aircraft with their mind. Now they're funneling us, in my opinion, into, it's like a Diet Coke version of consciousness control. They're using it for these very like small aspects, these military, these weaponry aspects. Why would we want to limit our ability to control consciousness to go on Twitter better or sift through like trolls better or whatever, Elon is trying to do, let him do it. But you can see that element there. So going off of what you were saying, Charlie, there very much is an element of consciousness control. Stories over the years of, crashed flying saucers, crashed UFOs, as much as you'd want to believe them, disbelieve them, you can't deny that the element is there of there's no steering wheel, there's no control panel. How do they do it? It's up here. And that's been a repeating theme. And here we are developing technology that does that. And for what? Weapons technologies? So that tells me, it's like they're telling us it's legitimate, but only if we can use it for this technology. Well, what else can we use it for? Tells me that there's a lot more potential in your noggin than they're letting on.
But that's how they always roll it out. Military grade first for those, and then we get hand-me-down technologies 3 decades later.
That's precisely it.
Yeah.
I like what Graham said earlier too about not trusting the internet. I mean, not trusting the mainstream media, because that's kind of where we got with like, Antifa or BLM or any of these social justice warrior people. Like they took a movement which was, civil rights, and then they like flipped it, shish kebabbed it, right? And then put out this thing that where these rich kids are burning down middle class, businesses, and they had all the corporations behind them. And you're not really raging against the machine if you have all the mainstream media, all the politicians, and all the corporations pushing you behind you. So it's almost kind of also like, we want this disclosure, but who's disclosing it to us?
Exactly.
The government, the intelligence agency. Right?
And then it's like John Brennan and Lou Elizondo, and you're like, I don't really want it that way.
Yeah,
I thought disclosure would be much better than this. Like
it's so
John fucking Brennan.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, what did John Brennan say?
Was Henry Kissinger not available to disclose it? I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah. Wasn't there that recent John Brennan clip commenting on UFOs? All he had to say was, "Oh, that's eyebrow raising." Something.
No,
like that.
I have that actually. It's a 3-minute clip.
Okay.
He went through this long-winded answer about how he would be interested in the analysis of the data of the fighter pilots And then at the end, he was flat out asked if he believes UFOs are supernatural, and he says that could be a possibility.
Ah, that's right. That's right.
So for John Brennan, ex-CIA director, to even entertain the idea that UFOs possibly could be supernatural is, to me, is eyebrow raising, because I would imagine he would just go to, no, it's nothing. It's just like a phantom, or if it's a piece of technology. But he acknowledged that it could be paranormal. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Bill Clinton was super fascinated with UFOs, and I know that he didn't have the clearance to see some of the stuff he wanted to see, and all that stuff. I mean, the Phoenix Lights happened. I mean, there's a lot of stories, you know, Oswald, obviously. I mean, Phoenix Lights was crazy because, I mean, it was just one of those stories that happened in the U.S.
What do you think that is, Ricky? What do you think the Phoenix Lights were?
I don't know.
They love saxophone music.
My uncle worked at the Air Force Base in Phoenix at the time. He was on base. He was a communications director. He flew in Vietnam after the war. He worked for the base down there, and so he was. He told me he was fielding questions. He asked the base colonel if they had anything up in the air. He said, "No, we have nothing up in the air at all. No flares, no nothing." So my uncle then in turn and talked to the media and the journalists and says, "It's not ours." So only later did they say it was flares. My uncle told me flat out it was nothing of ours up there.
Well, who was it? The governor or the mayor? Somebody who like dressed up like an alien during a press conference.
Yes, Fife Symington.
Yeah. And then afterwards, years later, he was in a documentary saying he did it because everybody was freaking out, and he was kind of just trying to lighten things up. But now looking back at it, like nobody knew what it was, and literally like the whole sky just turned black. They just saw. Yeah. I mean, everybody
saw it too.
I mean, Roswell, I mean, that is pretty well known now that the official story was the second story. The first story was something from outer space that they didn't understand. Then eventually they're like, well, now we need to cover this up. And that's when they took the picture of the bullshit material and then said it was a weather balloon. But
there's 4 stories of Roswell. There's the first story, which is ET. The second story, which is weather balloon. Third story, Stalin and mutant children crashed there. Then the fourth story, the Fourth Reich and Hitler mutant children.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the weather.
So many mutant children.
Japanese. Well, isn't what's fascinating that because so Joe Rogan's been going down the rabbit hole of UFOs a lot lately again, and it's almost like, a lot of people kind of just said, oh, everybody who's into this whole world is kind of crazy and whatnot. But there's so much evidence now that there's at least something to entertain. There's something there. And I mean, even the Blink-182 bassist, what's his name? Tom DeLonge. I mean, the fact that he actually is like doing work with like high ranked people and like have all these.
Yeah, but who's he working with though? He's been wanting to be on my show, and I would totally have him on. I'm not cutting you off, sorry, Ricky, but who's he working with?
He's from military.
John Podesta. I mean, like, isn't that what we just talked about? Like, is John Podesta any different than Brennan from the CIA? I mean, it's like
it's pretty important to keep the narrative, to have that narrative, whatever part of the deep state you're on, to have the disclosure narrative and to have access to keeping the private industry's secret, because that's where we all know the technology is. I don't think it is the government. It's in the private industries now, and it's been there for decades, and they won't acknowledge it. So whatever part of the deep state, they're fighting over the narrative, I think.
Well, Hitler wanted to reverse engineer UFOs. I mean, he was searching all over the world for them. Why wouldn't our military be doing the same thing? So without a doubt, I mean, that happens. I mean, one thing that's really fascinating to bring up the Joe Rogan podcast, the one that he did not too long ago with James Fox, who just did a UFO documentary not that long ago. The African school where all these children, and I'm sure some of you guys are probably familiar with this.
That one's one of my favorite cases right
That's mine too. I was about to say, that's one of my favorites.
So crazy.
Let's hear about it.
Yeah. So anybody who knows it better than I do you guys want to share?
Yeah, it was basically what was in the 70s or 80s.
70s, right?
In the 70s, yeah. There was in Zimbabwe, middle school or elementary school in Zimbabwe. all the children saw the same thing. A craft landed, these little beings got out, psychically communicated with these kids. They separated the kids, interviewed them after. They all told the same story. They all interviewed them recently again after they're growing up, telling the same story. It was very compelling because of the details and the way these kids described it and the feelings of calm and love that they were receiving from these beings. Yeah, it was a truly fascinating case.
Well, what's weird about that is that these aliens took the time to communicate to the children about the dangers of technology and the environment.
Right.
Barely
Yeah.
adult talk.
Right.
It's like if I was talking to like a kid, it's like, hey, this is how you debug a Python program. It's not going to know what to do with that. The kids don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't at the moment, but like we know, because we're all children at some point. Like somebody tells you something as a child, you might not understand what they mean or the importance of it at the moment, but as you get older and that sticks with you, all of a sudden you can relate it to, you know, your understanding of the world. And I think maybe it was a way of like planting the seed of like, hey, remember this. So as you get older, you know, this is important. And when you look at like one thing that we briefly kind of talked about on this show, transhumanism, I mean, if you think technology is just advancing, and then that's what, you know, whoever these ETs are, UFOs are, that's what the finish line is these people. That's the result of all of that, of technology just advancing, and us and technology becoming the religion, the new religion, where we're just like, must advance this no matter what. This is always good. This is always good. Maybe they're at that finish line saying, hey, like, save yourselves.
Don't be like us.
Yeah.
Well, they suck at communicating.
Or maybe they just fucked up and crashed and they were like on a joyride and they're like, say something. Someone's like, hey kids, don't get on your parents' phones. It's bad for you. Right? What do you want me to say? It's all I got.
Don't do anything to their buttholes.
Yeah, exactly. Not the kids. Yeah, they like crashing in front of schools. Apparently, the Westall school incident was also a case, but I think Zimbabwe kind of overshadows that one. And the communication is like a very specific thing. I think kids, not only will they be raw in their understanding, right? No filter. We all, you know, if you have children, you would know that. But they carry it with them. And you know, in the recent what was that? The documentary, the phenomenon that you referenced. Great, in my opinion, great documentary. I thought that was like a straight to the point. There was no BS in it, from my opinion. Like it was a great job for the UFO movement. If you want to stick to the bare bones, despite, you know, arguing for the extraterrestrial hypothesis, there's still something to be, that's a legitimate hypothesis in my opinion. But that communication is one thing that we hear over and over again, that telepathy. And it's very interesting that they notated that they only got this message when they looked into the eyes. Now, as an adult, they very firmly remembered this, very vividly remembered it. In fact, they went back to the location and they got these energies where it's like, it was scary. It's scary. And that's the one thing, these close encounters, it can traumatize somebody. And the more you learn about the phenomenon, the more real it becomes, but also the scarier it becomes, because it gives you that sense of hopelessness. But it's interesting, the one little girl, now an adult, had described the feeling of trying to break away from this, like, it's like they zoned in with this telepathy, and she had a difficult time breaking away from it, kind of like describing the idea of like snapping out of it. So, you know, there's some theories floating around as to what's with the school. I mean, I think it's a minority of cases. You have Westall, you have Zimbabwe, and those are the main close encounters of UFOs or crafts that include
Sandy Hook.
Yeah, confirmed. And, you know, it's just very interesting. You have to wonder if there is a motive. It could be an accident, but they came to quite the gentle landing there, and they just kind of zipped around their little craft, you know, did their thing. And, hey, the world's going to end. Technology sucks. All right, we're out of here. And they just, I don't know, man. I don't know what to make of it.
Well,
but
the interesting thing too is the pictures the kids drew. Like that, obviously they're not very good at drawing. So, but you could kind of see the idea. And if you look at like every story of, not every, I'm sure there's probably some exceptions to the rule, but just about every story that I'm aware of, the aliens always look somewhat the same, like no genitals, real skinny, big head, and whatnot. I mean, obviously, I guess we jumped to the conclusion that as time goes by and as we need less of our physical abilities and more of our mental abilities, our body will transform into that, right? I mean, that's what that's why they say, you know, you look at our primitive ancestors, their fingers are longer and whatnot, and certain things are different because as we don't need those physical abilities, our body adapts. So I mean, it is interesting that they all come to the same conclusion or have the same either I don't know experience. It's either the same people who are interacting with everybody, or is that just what everybody in the future looks like, or it's not the future, like you said, it's another dimension or whatnot. But like Charlie said, I think his point is so important. We have to understand that we don't understand anything outside of our five senses. I mean, this is, you know, it's just one of those things. It's like trying to explain to somebody who can't hear like what music is, or you know, or trying to tell my mother what the internet is. It's like they don't understand. There's no getting through to them. So it's just we do have to and I think it is this very arrogant cockiness of like, oh yeah, what I see, like that's reality. Everything, there is nothing outside of this, but we're very limited.
And there's something to be said too, like when you had mentioned, like a lot of people, I like what you had said, Ricky, about this could, you know, for a spacefaring species that spends an increasing amount of time, you figure they could be literal, you know, millions of years ahead of us in technology. If we want to go with extraterrestrial idea, let's just go with that idea now. You could argue that that's, you know, over time, evolutionarily, you adapt, you would take on that form. But then you have to take into consideration how much of this is cultural in the sense of the entire little green men idea, which came first, the little green men idea, and then the sightings, where you're kind of projecting that onto them, or did it come beforehand? So it's like, I like to look at, you know, you could look at the ancient alien phenomenon, sure, but I kind of like the UFO sightings from like the 1800s, where it's like they were still humanoid in that sense. You know, there was the big UFO flap of the 1890s. I think it was 1896 to something like that, in 1896 to like 1900, where you were just on the cusp of aviation. So people knew that we were going to be a flying species soon, right? We're right there. So people saw this UFO. It was well lit. It was zipping around the sky, and they said, someone cracked the code of aviation. That's awesome. Who's it going to be? He's going to land any moment to announce his invention, but he never did. But you look at that general time frame, so you have the simultaneous acknowledgement that could very well be our craft. Maybe someone finally cracked the code. But then you have like landing sites, encounters where they are still humanoid, and it never did turn out to be us. At least no one admitted to it. So I would argue, I guess, that the little green men thing, there's a cultural element to it, but there is very clearly some type of like humanoid element to it, at least based on eyewitness accounts dating back to the latter half of the 1800s. It's interesting.
There's also the theory amongst some abductees, contactees, and researchers that these gray type aliens are like biological robots or something that were sent here by actual entities that to interact with us because they can't, or some, you know, some type of robotic entity like that. There's also that theory that these beings could be, you know, look like that because they were made that way. You know?
That's I think that's Philip Corso's. He wrote the book The Day After Roswell, and Colonel Corso wrote that and had that term EBE, that these are biologically engineered robots for deep space travel. Yeah, whether you believe that or not, I don't know. I mean, but it seems interesting. It's an interesting concept that these are basically worker ants. And if we are humans and we have our own personalities, we have our own way of looking at the world, they're basically hive-minded, and they're communicating with us in a very basic way, so they might not be able to articulate exactly what they want, other than to strap us down and do what they want to do, and then they let you go.
Oh, so Democrats?
That's also it's also that, like, there was a book by Graham Hancock called Supernatural. I think it came out in the 90s, but he kind of compares like the fairy folklore, where like back in the day before spaceships, they would talk about fairies abducting children and then like
pedophiles
creating a hybrid or something. And he basically made the case that like it's the same setup where there's some kind of an abduction and some type of genetic tinkering, and then they drop you back off and you can get stuck in their world or whatever. But like in the 21st century, they look like grays. In like the 1500s, they were like fairies or something. And fairies were not like Tinkerbell. They were just these dangerous supernatural entities that were messing with us. And that's kind of the same thing with UFOs.
It's almost like whatever time period you're in, whatever our collective unconscious at the time is really ready to accept, those archetypes and those images are used for those events. And so back in the 1880s, we're able to wrap our head around airships, and some of us were able to wrap our heads around just a little bit more, so they were a little bit more unique. But as it moved from the 50s, a lot of people from Venus and much more humanoid looking, but just a little off, and then it gradually transformed. It seems like us, the participants, are manifesting, but coalescing the image in some way.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And that's why in the 1890s, these things were described as literal nuts and bolts, like very primitive versions of aircrafts. If you were to look
like
at
steampunk.
Yes, I swear they had piping. They described piping. They described all of this. The only difference was they had lighting systems and they moved fast. So it's like their actual real nature gave up the fact that they weren't relying on just pipes, nuts, and bolts to move around. So I really like that. Jacques Vallée is partial to that too. It's the idea of like over time, these legends are really just describing a singular phenomenon, which is why some people, regard, you could talk about Bigfoot, you could talk about cryptozoology, you could talk about UFOs, but they all carry on the same idea of like appearing and disappearing, the idea of appearing in different physical ways, the idea of just being just interdimensional type of just appearance changes, tricksters. And I like the word participants. It's almost like they are using our own perception of technology at the time, right on the cusp, enough for us to understand, but still kind of mind-blowing in how advanced it is at the time. I'm really interested in that idea. I think there's a lot more to it, and it speaks more towards the idea of the whole consciousness playing a major element of this. And there was a famous, I don't know the title of the document, maybe one of you know it, but I believe it was a CIA document. It's quite an old one. I'd say going back to maybe like the 60s, but they were saying in order to understand the UFO phenomenon, you can't understand it without the understanding of human consciousness. And I always thought that was an interesting document. I'll post it if I can find it after. I have it on my computer somewhere, but I was always intrigued by that. But then you start mentioning what you just brought up, and I think it all plays a part. I think it's all connected in that way.
And I think that's only part of it. I mean, that's part of the phenomena. There's the secret space program and the human aspect of the high technology vehicles that are roaming around. And maybe they have an access to our consciousness as well. Maybe they do. I mean, when we're out there trying to summon UFOs and doing the CE5 stuff, and we have these big flash bulbs answer questions, I don't know, what is that? Is that we're trying to make contact with loving ETs. But I don't know if that's really what it is. That seems like that would be the easiest answer, but maybe it is. Maybe it is the secret space program they know that we're all trying to do that all over the globe, and they're answering us with flashbulbs. I don't know. I mean, I really don't have any. But there's a whole bunch of different things going on, and the collective consciousness aspect, I think, could be part of that.
Yeah. And so to play devil's advocate here, like if we are the participants and our consciousness and our awareness is critical for these events to happen, would it be wise for the government to keep it as quiet as possible, because they don't want 1 billion people to suddenly be consciously aware that they can interact with these entities, not knowing that they could be positive or negative? There's going to be a yin and yang to all this stuff.
If I were an alien, whatever I'm going to say is going to be dumb. No, if I were an alien, I would for sure go and like mess with the kids. I'd be like, kids, be careful. Don't text too much because you're going to lose your thumbs, and then be like, gone.
There is silly stories like that, like the aliens that made that dude pancakes or whatever.
I would think that the government would want to control how we view it. Yeah. This, if it's up to our collective consciousness, then they'd want to shape reality. And I think that's why they employ Hollywood in that, where they bring Hollywood in there to create a version of extraterrestrials, what is possible, what is not possible, dangerous, and keep it within this acceptable area where they can allow us to speculate and geek out as much as we want, as long as we don't get into this real component of it that they're trying desperately to hide from us, like the fact that we're all connected to one another and that we have, skills that are untapped, and, and we have major limiters on our IQ capacity and things like that. And that there's ways to break free from this. And so I think the government has an incentive to control the narrative, and they do that through Hollywood. And then we see Hollywood's role in conjunction with especially the United States military and Department of Defense's influence in Hollywood, and how we get alien movies where they're the enemy and we're fighting them, and Independence Day and all the, and they're coming to get us, and they create this paranoia. And you have to ask the question, why? Are they setting us up for something, in the future? It's crazy, of course, but it's possible.
We could team up with the aliens through our consciousness to fight the real enemy, which is
the government.
Government.
Yeah. That'd be nice.
Charlie, you mentioned the media. I mean, there is an unavoidable occult aspect to what they're putting out in the media these days.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can tell that they're definitely, you look at Netflix, it's all witch and demonic and all this stuff. There is an occult agenda going on. And I think it also coincides with this whole UFO thing. I'm not sure how it all connects, but I believe that there is some sort of occult connection, especially with what the media is trying to do with, some of these subliminal messages that they've been putting out in the media lately. And when you combine it with the information that they're coming out with the UFOs, it's pretty strange that 2020, this year, the UFO thing, we have this culmination of occult material on TV. And, you look at all of it together, I think that there is a big connection between the metaphysical and this UFOs that they don't want us looking at, but they still kind of throw it in our face in a way through the media to try and, I don't know if it's a confusion or if it's just
revelation of the method.
Yeah. It's there's something going on there, but I think that there's an aspect to it that we're ignoring there as well.
I have a lot of friends that they'll send you articles about like, oh look, the government's acknowledging UFOs, like it's fucking news to me or something. Like, I haven't been following this stuff for 30 years, and they'll like ask me like, what's going on, Mike? And I will just say this: like the more you dig into researching UFOs, it will inevitably lead you to searching and looking up things about spirituality and consciousness. And that throws them for a loop because they really, like everyone else, like the media, they want to believe it's a tangible craft that you can get in and go to Mars and have a good time, when it's much deeper than that. And I don't think most people want to start thinking about those kinds of things because it's hard to really articulate what it is or how you interact with it. So people just will focus on laser beams.
Yeah,
I think humans want to quantify everything. We just we simplify it, right?
Yeah,
we just want to quantify it. If it can't be, if we can't quantify it, then it doesn't exist. It can't be real.
Yeah. And it's brought us this far. I mean, there is something to be said about that, but we can't limit ourselves to that. And if you think about it, this conversation has come full circle, going back to the idea of the media wants us to perceive the aliens, perceive UFOs, or perceive them as aliens at all, because it allows them a certain level of control over the phenomenon in general. Number one, I'm a perfect story of that. It was UFOs that got me into literally the rest of what I'm researching today. If it wasn't for UFOs, it's a perfect kind of microcosm for everything. You understand a central control structure that deals with these these pieces of information centrally, right? There's an argument to say that there's certainly elements of this that are well known to individuals that, I mean, for God's sakes, presidents don't have access. They don't have clearance to this. I mean, we're dealing with dark channels here, dark money, dark channels that are so beneath the surface. I don't know who would have access to it other than a small group of people. I used to doubt that. I'm a success story when it comes to that type of material where I just said, you know what? I don't know anything about this. I said, let me actually sit down and read this. And my mind was just blown apart, and here I am today. But it's gone full circle because look at what the media has done. They pigeonhole us, just like we were talking before about, oh, you go to religion. Well, that's great because we're still focusing on spirituality, but it's a limited spirituality. Then you've got the other side, science. Hashtag I fucking love science. And then it's all of a sudden you're only there. No spirituality reality, no nothing.
Yeah.
So every element, and there's going to be bad actors that are helping that process along. And then even worse, dividing them within those little pigeonholes. UFO community infighting, let's divide them in half. So it's like they can never actually get together and really think about this objectively. So yeah, that's kind of come full circle from how we started this conversation off.
And
Doesn't
science
memory
is
hole look like my kid?
It's an honor,
Like,
Sam.
I'm so proud of my son.
We got to get a DNA test.
I think a big part of it too is science is very exclusive. There's a finite number of people in science, but whereas everybody can participate in spirituality, everyone can participate in meditation, in reaching their own human potential. And it's interesting what you said before. It's like if the aliens in their craft, if that's linked to steering it with your brain or whatever it is, it doesn't run on a fuel. It's like consciousness powered. If humans know that there's a connection between consciousness powering other things, it's like I think that road eventually leads to humans reaching their own highest potential, highest good. And I don't think the powers that be want that happening at all, because then we won't need them.
Yeah, like the disclosure thing, not only would all the people that are being controlled by religious beliefs, their belief system would crumble or have to be rearranged, but then also all the people that worship science, that think we're in a material universe where your mind has no effect on reality. If it's revealed that UFOs are 100% connected to that truth, then that structure crumbles as well. So I don't think they want to disclose at all, but if it's true, it will eventually hopefully happen.
Yeah, I think that's,
you would hope the scientists would err on the side of just getting the best answers out there. But what you would find is what happens in the past, which is they just get married to their own version of it, and they don't never want to break from that. And so they fight and just to try and discredit anybody else, because out of trying to preserve what they, the way that they always knew it. And so, yeah, I wouldn't expect there to be much support from the religious side or the scientific communities on this, because it challenges their authority on that, and people don't like that, and they react in desperate and shitty ways when their authority gets challenged. And so I would expect there to be a fight. I would expect it to need to, the proverbial white UFO landing on the White House lawn type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or else it would just be, you think we got a massive disinformation campaign on vaccines in the United States? What if it was them all trying to defend against us figuring out about aliens? They would do anything to lie to us.
Biggest power structures are tied up in science and religion. It's like the Vatican, and then you have all the big pharma, big tech.
Yeah.
Now they're teaming up.
Done a pretty good job of ignoring the whole phenomenon, it seems. I mean, when he was on Rogan there, they just glossing over any kind of UFO evidence or account that there's, alternative propulsion technologies out there running around our Earth. It's strange that, someone like him, that you'd think, I don't know. I just don't think, he's a bit of a wild card, I think, but I don't think he's involved in any of this yet. I mean, I don't think so. Darren, you had a question about Elon, or you were going to mention about his Neuralink or something.
Oh, no.
No, that's past that. Yeah.
Come on.
I want to talk.
Tell us about the Neuralink.
Yeah.
Tell us about Neuralink.
Darren's theory is just, it's gone.
I don't think Neuralink's going to control anything. I think it's just there to sap more information out of people. It's just a mining expedition, just like social media is. I mean, social media didn't start trying to control people until the later stages. And I don't think Neuralink will either. Social media is just kind of getting to that point now where it's starting to probably be manipulative. And I mean, there's a percentage of that falls on our own shoulders, because just as we have this natural sort of affinity to click on things that agree with our narrative, and social media has made it fucking easier than ever to do that. And I think, the government's sort of capitalizing on that, but there's a lot of personal sovereignty and just only following your own viewpoint. And I think so social media is doing that now. I think Neuralink will, for the first decade or so, will mostly be sort of sucking whatever data it can out of you, and so it can weaponize it a decade down the road. I mean,
I think you're right.
the short story is just to stay the fuck away from it.
Yeah, I'm good with the implants, thanks. I think you might be right.
Yeah, and social media, I mean, is a fucking train wreck at this point. That again, is time for a big step back.
Yeah, look at Instagram. They just came out with a new terms of service. I think I just so what was his name? What's that guy's name, Frank? The redhead with the long hair? No, the one
the comedian guy. The comedian guy.
JP Sears.
Yeah, JP Sears.
Yeah.
They have this new terms of service that I guess we've already secretly agreed to. Like they have access to your camera, all your texts, your internet history, like all your shit.
Yeah.
And I really love Instagram, so I'm torn.
I know. Well, it's a mode of like for people in the line of business we are, there's like a way to use social media. It's still damaging to you, but we have to get the information out in some way or the other. So it's like in a way a necessary evil. It's the best way to connect with all these people. But I think you had a great point about Neuralink. I mean, oftentimes these motivations, as much as we want to say, it's going to just click on and all of a sudden, it's this mind control, human control device. It's really more just human and tethered to reality than that. It's simple data mining. I mean, what better way to advertise more effectively than to know what people are thinking about, or at least understanding their intentions more intimately. And I think same thing with going back to the science idea, where we can argue that science doesn't, they're making these decisions or holding things back for us because they don't want us to understand X, Y, and Z, inner exploration, spirituality. But more reasonably, it's because they won't get grant money for any of their, there's no grant money in researching UFOs. And you're sacrificing your reputation if you're going outside of the established paradigm. So I'd argue that the motivation for them not touching a lot of the stuff that we deem important is due to the simple fact that it's taboo, and then that taboo creates the inability for them to then get the necessary funding to go ahead and do this. I mean, the overarching motivation will probably be, what we've been talking about, but the little scientists, the guys that are actually interested in this stuff, I'd be damned if a lot of them aren't talking about this stuff in private, but they're not going to sacrifice their career for it. They're not going to get funding.
Well, they should. Where's the integrity? I mean, it's disgusting. I mean,
yeah, but isn't it interesting how now in the dire stages of 2020, now they've even managed to manipulate it so that our sector isn't really talking about it anymore.
Or the scientists that are coming forward are just being completely censored, even when it's natural cures or stuff you would.
Well, I mean,
we can't imagine.
Yeah. I'm talking about just the UFO thing specifically. I mean, the people that used to spend the most time talking about UFOs have just spent the last year talking about they've managed between the Great Reset and COVID and Trump and election stealings and Q and MAGA. I mean, they've completely derailed the alternative community.
Yeah, it's true.
Nobody, at the end of 2020, I would say 5 to 10% of the content that might have been about UFOs 5 years ago. I mean, we're just as guilty. We've gone to UFOs as a once every 3 months thing, where it used to be a once a month staple, right? To the point that we're starting a whole new show just to deal with COVID and conspiracies. And I mean,
the deeper, more controversial stuff.
In some ways, it's to insulate our brand, because I mean, we've started getting some YouTube strikes, and we've got some current concerns with PayPal and stuff like that. So we're just going to start a whole new PayPal and a whole new website and a whole new feed, and we're just going to run simultaneous shows. And if they delete that one, then we'll just fucking fire up a new one with a new email address and just keep doing it all over again. And hopefully at the same time, we can get Grimerica back to that, talking about UFOs once a month and talking about ethereal Bigfoot once in a while.
And the crazy part is the censored part is going to be doing, reading studies on vitamin D.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
not UFOs.
Yep. It's incredible how far it's gone. And there's so much uncertainty I've never seen just this movement. It seemed to be a lot more solidified there for a while, because even though I only recently got actively involved about like 4 or 5 years ago, it's like I was still passively looking into some things here. But it's like you always had confidence that, your favorite people like you guys, would be doing your thing, researching, putting out content that is increasing people's knowledge. And only now do we have to do fucking mental hula hoops to figure out, how do I just talk and talk about the important stuff that I want to discuss
in an honest way. Yeah.
Do I make a separate channel? Do we do this? Well, PayPal might cut me. Patreon, shit. It's like, Jesus, man, you're expending all your energy, and it's not anyone's fault. It sucks.
Have you guys found that UFO discussions are censored on YouTube? Because, you know, Charlie and I were talking earlier. For some reason, I don't know why, but the occult seems to be perfectly acceptable on YouTube.
Yeah.
But once you get into like politics, they go nuts. But if you go, well, they're doing this politics because of the occult, then everyone's like, yeah, it's cool, man. Just, you know, it's like, ooh,
It's trendy.
Moloch, yeah, nobody believes that stuff. But, you know, but if you get into like, oh, it's being done for because of rapid pedophilia, then all of a sudden we're getting, it's like just very interesting. I have you guys, because I do some UFO. I mean, like, I've had Eddie Bravo on my show, so anytime I do a UFOs thing, I get, oh, it's all fake, space is fake, it's pledge blue bloom, and that's all I get all the time, which I'm fine with, because, you know, everyone's allowed to believe whatever they want. But do you guys find that YouTube is striking UFO talk?
No, but what you said right there, space is fake. If you listen to that clip of what the Israeli scientist said, the aliens told him until humans understand what space really is and what spaceships are, is they will not make their presence known. I mean, that's what he said. What space really is. So what does that mean? But so
the space outside Antarctica.
Ooh, oh my God.
I did notice it's kind of related, but the great conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter, like there's like a big astrological definition of that. But if you tried to look up astrology of that on YouTube, it wouldn't bring you anything. It would bring you like hashtag science, like telescopes. But if you even search like horoscope or astrology or astrological meaning, it just kept showing science stuff, which, I mean, I have a sense that the occult and kind of like spiritual stuff is starting to slowly get shaved off. Like, oh, this is pseudoscience, this is censorable. So I've just noticed recently, at least the astrology is starting to get kind of blocked off.
Same
like
with same with the
Google.
UFO stuff. Like it's not being censored, but it's certainly not being promoted in the algorithm as it was like even 3 years ago. I mean, that's just
it. Yeah, that's it. I think it's all about algorithmic priority. I think anything. I think it's not about one subject or the other. Although depending on not so much the importance of the subject, but how close it gets to the truth. Whether we know how close it is or not. I mean, look, there's truths out there that we might call bullshit on, but they know it's like, oh shit, shut it down. But I think it's all about algorithmic priority. I think across the board, anything alternative viewpoints, it's probably a lot easier, being able the technology to do so, to just comprehensively nerf any alternative viewpoint, whether it's astrology, whether it's UFOs, whether it's pedogate, whether it's this, whether it's that, just name it. And I mean, I can see it. So the Zimbabwe UFO case that we brought up before, that's a fairly, I don't want to say well-known, but it's within the UFO community and even abroad. You know, I've heard people bring that up as one of their kind of go-to sightings. Go ahead and try and search for those interviews on YouTube. You get commentary on it. You get videos about people talking about it, but you'd have to go to DuckDuckGo to actually find the raw interview footage. So you can basically test the amount of censorship or algorithmic nerfing of each subject, dependent on when you search on YouTube, does it come up? If yes, this, if no, this. Go to DuckDuckGo, search the same key terms. I know we all know this, but you can demonstrate it quite clearly when you exercise this, and you could do that with Zimbabwe. Because for a while, I wasn't getting a ton of blowback with the UFO subject, but I started to notice, I said, they're hiding some of these cases, the raw interviews of things, the raw eyewitness testimony. It isn't as readily available at all. And the key indicator to me that this is like a comprehensive agenda is the very fact that indeed you get science stuff first, like the real, what do they call it? Authoritative sources.
Trust the science.
Yeah, exactly. That's that comprehensive. And sometimes they aren't even related. It's just a mainstream science source about UFOs that isn't even related to Zimbabwe. So it's not like Zimbabwe debunked by whatever, Snopes or whatever. It's just an authoritative source talking about UFOs more generally. So I think they're just comprehensively nerfing the entirety of alternative movements, regardless of the subject. I think we're at a real turning point on the internet here, and things are going to change. We'll survive. We'll get through it, but they're playing dirty, and we have to open up our mind and open up our willingness to try new things, and whether we want to or not.
Yeah, I think with any small subject though that's fringe, I think Google over the past 10 years, you would be able to find like a Geocities site that had good information. Yeah, great. It wasn't the best web design or whatever. It had like GIFs and stuff. But
Yeah, classic.
like I would rely on that. Yeah, with like there was a lot of good websites like that. And now if you go to Google, the first page of the search of a Google page is just pure shit now. Like it's filtered and just like repackaged mainstream links and ads. So it's not as easy as it used to be, I think.
Yeah. Before I go, I want to thank all you guys for having me on, and I think it's really important that we do more shows like these to get this, this UFO topic. I think for me, it's like Memory said, it was one of the subjects that really got me into this. It's really near and dear to my heart, among many others. But I think in order to get to any truth of it, we have to have more of a wider aspect of views to come together and look at it. And I think this is a great show to do that. And thanks again, guys, for having me on. That was an awesome conversation. And I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, nice talking to you, man.
Hey.
See you, Chris.
God bless you. We'll talk to you soon. Great job.
Wait, every time someone leaves.
I love it.
So funny.
Oh,
I think so powerful. This is so interrelated in regards to science, and that's why even though this isn't about COVID, it does make you think of like our current times and our current issues with what's going on with like science being the new religion. And you see it with Rupert Sheldrake was a guest who's been on my show before, and he's been a part of a bunch of studies that are considered pseudoscience. He's done he talked about how they would teach mice a maze, and then mice somewhere else would learn that maze quicker, and every time they taught mice in different locations that never met the same maze, they would know the same maze. So there is this like interconnection, like hippie, and hippies would always say, oh, we're all one. Like we kind of are,
Mice are taking our jobs.
Yeah, 100th monkey effect, I think.
Yeah, that too. And so what's that article inheriting father's fears, the idea of passing along trauma and all these things down to generations, and the placebo effect, right? So I mean, it's all about like the scientists, the mainstream scientists are all about like trust science, and it's all just it can be explained and we know everything and take our word for it, but yet their pharmaceutical drugs only have to be tested against something they don't yet still understand, the placebo. I mean, the placebo exists, but yet they don't even understand how it works, but yet that's what they're testing against. So against nothing or something, but we're not sure what it is. So in a way they push you away. They're attempting to push you away. They don't want you to look at anything that can't be explained, but yet to do their work, to patent their drugs, they have to test it against something that can't be explained. So it doesn't make any sense.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's interesting how so many of us came from interest in research into UFOs. And that comes with a natural distrust of the mainstream media, whether the cover up was from the governments or industry or the media was the ones that, whether it was an intentional or not, would make fun of the true stories and highlight the hoaxes to be debunked later. I mean, we're all just ingrained. I mean, I think that's one of the things that it's interesting how a lot of the UFO people end up where we are talking about all these different things, because we've just been ingrained with distrust in the narrative for decades.
Bob Lazar, you guys believe him? What anybody has opinion? Strong opinion, Bob Lazar?
I have opinion on it, and it's kind of like what Bill Cooper talked about. How, like in his book, where later he talked about how he thought he was being fed all this UFO information to put out that later he didn't believe was real. Do I believe Bob Lazar believes everything he said? I think he does. I think that, I don't want to say useful idiot, because that is demeaning to Bob Lazar. I don't think he's an idiot in any way, but in the understand the context of that term, that they use people in a way to further an agenda, and the best way to do that. The best way to do, there we go, useful scientist. Thank you. The best way to do that is to have someone believe that they are doing something against all odds, or that they're naturally rising up the ranks of whatever they're doing by themselves without an invisible hand. And that's my honest belief, because if Bob Lazar worked where he said and was giving out any real information he didn't want out, Bob Lazar would not be breathing anymore. And that's my humble opinion. If it was really information that they didn't want out, I think Bob Lazar would not be with us anymore.
Well, would it
That's
be
my opinion.
possible that it's so beyond our understanding that they aren't concerned that people are going to take it seriously anyways?
That's true. That could actually be. They probably have a gauge on public consciousness. They probably have a kind of a comprehensive understanding of this is just too far above what the public is ready for. We're actually safe on this one. They'd be happy for that. They don't have to do any legwork. It's like 9/11. Yeah, where it's like they actually got to put some work in to say, oh shit, all right, we got it, guys, all hands on deck. Let's say it was and then they got to concoct something. There's probably some things that are just so far above the public's ability to understand, except for a few folks, maybe like you, maybe like I, right? This entire group here, where it's like they're actually quite confident we could get away with this. And hey, that's a vacation for them. They don't got to work. They don't got to actually do anything to shut it down. They're like,
but if it was actual technology that they deemed like super top secret, would they be okay with Bob Lazar going on Joe Rogan multiple times?
That's true.
I would also say that the people there have a pretty good psychological workup of who is most likely to leak information and who won't, and that they probably made that assessment about Bob Lazar. And I'm kind of with Sam here. I believe Bob Lazar. I believe Bob Lazar believes exactly what he experienced. And the great thing about this information is some of it may be true. It's just that you poison it with a bunch of BS, so people will discount it wholesale. I believe Bob Lazar experienced what he did, and what he says, I think he is truthful what he's saying, but whether or not ultimately is true, how do you verify? It's tough to.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine, his father, before Bob Lazar came out and did that big interview with Joe Rogan, a good friend of mine, he was on one of my, I used to have a show called Conspiracies Now, and it was shot at the Comedy Store, and it was just meant to be like a fun comedy version of Conspiracies. Like it was meant to be the worst, like public broadcast ever. And he talked about how his father, who has since now passed away, pulled him aside and was like, I have to tell you this story. And the story goes is that he was basically like not a maintenance man, but a man who was who worked for this institute, an institute in Chicago, and his job was to fix all the equipment in the place. So he'd get called, hey man, the printer's broken. He would be called to fix the printer. Well, one day he gets called to a floor that he's never been to before. He goes down to the floor and he walks in, and all of a sudden he's like, what the fuck's going on? He looks into this room, and there's like a monkey with a helmet on getting like laser shot into it.
No.
Then he walks down a little farther, and there's a horse that looks like it's getting pumped with something, and the horse is on the table. He walks a little farther, and there's this giant room, he says. His dad tells him, and there is this craft in there that he's never seen before.
Did they ask him to fix something on it?
What's that?
The UFO has a printer.
The whole thing. Okay, so he says he sees grays on there with one green thing. He sees a couple grays and one little green thing. And before he knows, he has guns drawn on him, right? So they're like, what are you doing down here? And they're like, you sent me down here. For some reason, they let him go, right? But he says every time, once a year, when he least expects it, these men in black show up and ask him if he's told anybody.
Jesus.
And like he'll be traveling around the world and he'll get pulled into an airport side and they'll be like, have you told anybody? And they're like, no. But he goes, my dad isn't creative like that. He doesn't make up stories like that.
Wow.
And this was like, as he knows his life has come to an end. But what if it's the same thing? It's like, let's get this guy down here, see this stuff, and let him tell this controlled information that he wants him to know. I mean, it was the exact same story that Bob Lazar said.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we can, like I said, with a lot of things, I don't think we can afford to just write something like that off. I mean, we've seen the bizarre things that these people have engaged in. I mean, just across the board, you can't afford to write something like that off. So how are we going to pretend to know these people's intentions with anything? We don't know how they leak it. I mean, what was the one, I know you guys will know of, what's his name, where they fed information to the guy that was claiming to make contact with aliens and it drove him to suicide? It's a classic story.
Paul Benowitz?
Yeah. So
I mean, there's a movie about that called Mirage Men.
Mirage Men.
And
That's it.
Everyone should watch it when it comes to disinformation and poisoning the well. That is classic.
Yep, absolutely. So, like I said, it's like if you were to tell someone right now about that story without telling them that that is an established fact, they would see no reason for that to happen. And yet it did. So I think that's a perfect example of just saying we can't doubt what these people, number one, are willing to do in order to both contain information and also control the release of it. So I'm willing to entertain just about any story these people have, and you judge it for yourself. I think that's the best way to do it, which is why it's so problematic that, there's just so much censorship going on. Let the information go. It's only become recently that apparently information is dangerous. It's been free formed like for all of time until now. Interesting.
Wait, you said that story took place in Chicago?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm wondering if it was at Argonne Lab, because that's like it's outside of Chicago, but I swear to God, that place is very similar to like the Stranger Things laboratory. It's literally in like these woods that is close to where there is like paranormal activity and all that. But that Argonne Lab was a part of the Manhattan Project way back. But anytime I hear about Chicagoland sketchy science labs, I think of that place.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he said his dad wasn't creative, never was really made up stories like that and stuff like. And then I heard that Bob Loves Our thing. I'm like, damn, dude.
Maybe he just saw like a monkey with symbols. It was like a wind up.
That's probably what's in my head.
Pumping the horse, or was the horse pumping somebody?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't one of those movies that you like to watch, Ricky. It was like it's some like you ever hear where they like to see how much of something an animal can take before it dies?
Yeah, it's called porn.
Yeah, that's kind of what he was talking about. That his dad saw that, so it's very interesting, dude. It's very interesting. And then there was what was the story of the two guys who were going fishing and they got kidnapped? It was like two brothers.
Yeah.
And they told it, and I forget the name of it, but it's really, really interesting. And they say the same story over and over, and it's here's the thing.
Was it Pete and Repeat? They fell off a boat.
No, it's
I know what you're talking about, Sam.
Pascagoula, maybe, or
yeah, what was that called? The Pascagoula?
Yes, I believe it's
Pascagoula.
I think it might have been. I'm looking it up right now.
Are these the yahoos
It's
that
like in the
decided to
70s?
take out their flashlight and signal to the UFO? Is that what you're talking about? They were like in a canoe and it was like, hey, let's signal a UFO with our flashlight. Next thing you know, they're being teleported up into a UFO.
I think you might be right. Yeah, it's Pascagoula abduction, 1973. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claimed they were abducted by aliens while fishing near Pascagoula, Mississippi. That sounds like it might be the one. Yeah.
I never heard about the flashlight thing, but it's a really compelling story, though.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot.
But now we're out there doing it to try and get abducted.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't happen. I mean,
I don't want to get abducted. I don't want to get probed, dude.
Yeah.
No way.
What I think a lot of like
only.
a lot of like the overt like gray aliens in a spaceship thing kind of happened more. It seems like it happened from like the dropping of the A-bomb to like the 90s, and then it seemed like it kind of shifted. But because I even think of just the X-Files like that, I would watch shows on just regular TV all the time when I was a kid in the 90s, and it seemed like back then it was more common, but I don't know where we're at 21st century style. It seems like there's not as many overt things like that.
They had to make room for the Real Housewives.
Yeah, right. Save that spot. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good point. It feels like there's, and going back to the conversation about like Jacques Vallée's beliefs about like the cultural changes of our understanding, the image of these things change with our understanding, shapeshifter, trickster phenomenon. It's interesting. It also reminds me of the Belgian flap. I think that was the
1990, yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
90, yeah.
Yep. And that was fantastic because they also signaled to the craft. There was a story, I forget if it was the police officers or if it was just a civilian eyewitness, but they saw the thing floating, silently over the field. These were triangular crafts. These weren't Delta humongous mile-wide craft like Hudson Valley boomerangs or the Phoenix Lights, but they had the typical red ball underneath. The thing would come down, zip around, do its thing, go back up into the craft. But they signaled to it with its headlights, and they flashed it twice. And apparently, the way it goes is the thing flashed its lights the same amount of times they flashed its headlights at it right after. So there's some type of communication. There's been a few stories.
Cops coming.
Like
Watch
that.
out, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. Heads up. Heads up.
I'm gonna go into a field and just start like flashing and like anything happens. Come on.
That'd be alien invasion at that point.
You don't like them?
And you know, I mean, speaking of flashing, I mean, like, how many stories of aliens coming here trying to hook up with Earth chicks? I mean, like, a lot of these aliens treat like Earth like they're Tijuana, like they're just here for like a donkey show or something. They just want to get weird. You know, it's like that story about like when Mormons, they get like one weekend to just go to
Rome
town
Sprigga?
and just get weird and then come back and then they got to churn butter for the rest of their life.
Amish,
Maybe that's what aliens do. They just kind of come here, get weird with some fucking alien, some Earth chicks.
Well, who's the guy that got abducted by like the sexy Nordic chick?
Yes.
Like the Nordic alien?
The Pleiadians?
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
He's from South America or something.
And he has like a thick book and it's like chapter 20, like my sexual experience with the Nordic. And it's like a long,
fully
he
illustrated.
insists they're like the hottest.
Pop up.
My penis froze and broke off.
You can argue if you want to treat that as like a completely 100% real story. I mean, you can argue because you're right. He did describe it as like the most beautiful like being he's ever seen, which is weird because like it's not exactly human necessarily. So you can argue that just like these things change their appearance. You know, if you really want to go out on a limb, you could say perhaps it presented itself in a way that just plays off of like the ultimate aspirations of what a male or a female might regard as being desirable within a human. But yeah, it was funny. I think he like went to like a psychiatrist or a doctor. He said, "Doc, I gotta tell you something. This chick, she took me up into the sky." And you know, the guy was fucking interested. He said, "That's going in my files." And he didn't want to like release it to the public, but he kind of did. I forget exactly how it was released, but it's funny you bring that up. I was just listening to that one the other day. So.
It could even be like a modern day incubus or old hag experience.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And you were scared shitless of those in the past, but now, you know, that we think there's life on other planets, we have beautiful aliens coming to do that instead.
I could see him getting really arrogant, like, I like exotic chicks. No, I'm not talking about Asian. I mean outer space exotic. Another fucking species, okay? Get out of here, Brazilians. Yeah.
Not exotic enough.
I can give you guys my abduction story. It's only like 10 seconds.
Does it involve hot chicks?
Unfortunately not. So this memory, I've asked a lot of people about this, doctors, anesthesiologists, everyone, my family. And so this is my memory. I was probably between the ages of 5 and 7. I wake up face down on a table. My hands are tied to the edges of the medical gurney, which feels like a medical gurney. I'm up in the air, and my legs are tied. I look back. There's someone over my shoulder, like behind me, standing next to my left foot. This is I'm laying face down. I managed to get my left foot free of its binds. I was crying in some kind of pain, and I managed to kick back at this person. And I remember feeling an immense amount of gratitude and satisfaction of being able to kick back. And at which point that person grabbed my leg, held it down, and retied it. And there's my memory. That's all I got.
That's
What does your butthole feel like?
I don't remember. But that memory just popped in my head, and I talked to doctors. I talked to everyone in my family. I had my tonsils taken out near that period of time, but the doctors didn't do that. It's not common to tie a child down unless they're a danger to themselves during an operation, which I wasn't because my parents stayed with me the entire time. I have people say that it's a false memory, Mike. Or it's a dream. You're making something up. But I know the feeling of a dream, because a dream is like you're kind of molasses. It's slow. This wasn't that. This feels like a real memory that happened, and it's just like 15 seconds I can't place.
Where did you live when this happened?
Yeah.
In Akron, Canton, Ohio.
Ohio's got a lot of UFO stuff.
That's crazy. Was there anything unusual other than the tonsils? I mean, could you pin anything unusual, any anomalous. I don't even mean anomalous like that. Just anything unusual in life.
Not to my knowledge. At that period in time, I was, I was like any 5 to 7 year old. I loved. I watched The Lone Ranger late at night. I remember watching The Lone Ranger and being scared of thunder at a certain period of time. But that kind of faded. But no other. Like I remember drawing UFOs for my mom and giving her pictures of my UFOs and stuff like that.
And what did they?
Have you ever done? Sorry, I was going to say, have you ever done hypnotherapy?
I've seen a few psychics, and they said you can do a hypnotic regression. I contacted a MUFON representative in Phoenix, but I don't know if I want to open up that door.
Yeah,
I might be comfortable just letting it go at this point, but it's a memory that I probably think about every other day. It just pops in my head.
You should do it then.
Left an impression on you, man.
Damn.
If I do the, I'll record it and just put it out.
Live stream.
But I want to make sure I find a reputable hypnotic regression person, so it can be tainted, but by suggesting things. So I don't know how I feel about it. Maybe at some point in time I will.
That's intriguing, man. It leaves an impression on you, and it's like you would know yourself best, and you think about it every other day as an adult.
I remember I was not alone in the room. It felt like there were other people, other children in the room as me as well.
Wow. Sometimes people argue like that the abductions are not even your physical body. Sometimes it's literally like astral projection almost. And even people that do like DMT are like, yeah, they were doing surgery on me in like the DMT. The machine elves were doing surgery on me. So, and that's another weird thing with like the fairies stuff. It's like they're maybe up in the astral, if it is like your astral body, which is getting operated on. I don't know.
I've heard that before. Both things you just said was like the astral, the idea that it's not your physical body. I've heard stories of abductions where, the typical, sometimes they just kind of appear there. Other times it's sort of like there's an upward motion and they look down and they do see their own body, which is kind of overlaps with near-death experiences, as if there really is some sort of like a version of yourself that isn't there. But what you just said was also very interesting, Mike, about what you said. There's other kids there. I've heard a story like that. There's sometimes abduction stories where they've described the presence of other victims there that are just as confused as you might be at the time. Again, you got to take it as they say, believe it, don't believe it, but I can't afford to not read into those things. So it's interesting you say the presence.
I don't even want to believe it. I want to Google
I know,
myself.
I
don't want to. I want to make fun of this stuff. I don't want to be a part of it.
I always say this is the only line of work. I'll say it again. Only line of work where if we're wrong, we're relieved. Only line of work. It's kind of nice if we're wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing about this genre, not just UFOs and aliens, but conspiracies. Like, we would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong about Saturnist and the pedophilia and all that shit and the false flags. I would love to be wrong. It would mean the world's a little that we're not being controlled by dark arts occultists. That's a great point, dude. That's a great point. Yeah. I also want to just say that I believe, I think there's people are afraid to believe that there's more going on in this world than they've been taught. And it's very hard to deprogram people. It's very simple to believe in something that you were taught as a child. I've always believed that we shouldn't teach religion until somebody's 18 years old. And if we did that, the only religion that would be left would be Buddhism, right? Or Hinduism. But they gotta get you early so that you buy into this stuff. But I mean, if you say aliens and multiple dimensions, where does that fit into Sunday church?
Yeah,
we need to just put it into Easter or something. Just make holidays.
Yeah,
it actually fits in a little.
Halloween.
It fits in a little bit better for religious people though than.
What about Kwanzaa?
IFL
Where
science.
does it fit with Kwanzaa? I would, we'd all be in the Kwanzaa if we slipped in aliens and you got a day off from work. We'd all be celebrating Kwanzaa.
Depends on the food, but yeah.
It depends on the food.
But no, I think the super rational people I know, like, it doesn't matter if there's like a UFO on the front lawn. There's some people that are just, they've got their blinders on and they're like, oh no, none of that. That's not real.
Well, it takes more work to consider it.
Nope.
Yeah, demoralization. At that point, you can't reason with people. They've been. I think there's something more. There's something larger at play when it comes to that. We've already discussed how science has become more of a religious doctrine, where even if you're arguing perfectly compatible within the scientific paradigm, but opposite of their point, they will still deny it. Now, what is that? I mean, you can say that, oh, that person is just stubborn, but how do you reconcile that with a large swath of people that are behaving the same way? And I believe it has something to do with just the larger programs that unleashed upon us in terms of demoralizing the populace. So I don't know what it is, like a controlled apathy, like a sensation of simply not wanting to. And even if you do want to, you combat these new types of information. I mean, there's that classic video of what's his name, Yuri, the ex-KGB guy that was talking. You cannot reason with people that have been comprehensively just demoralized. And I have to say, some people have taken up issues with that gentleman, saying it's fake, it's real, but I see it in front of my eyes. I can stay objective as possible and argue, look, I don't know for sure, but isn't this interesting? Take a look at this. Take a look at this. I'm not saying I know 100% sure, but they'll still shut down. There's something else larger at play there. I don't know quite how to articulate what that is.
Yeah.
But there's something going on mentally, and these are all normal people. I look at them as victims. I mean, I was one myself. I was on autopilot. I literally, it dawned on me one day where I was like, holy shit, I actually don't know anything. I said, what do I know about UFOs? I said, what's on my TV? What's on the books I read? Let me read the primary documents. And then I broke out of it somehow. I don't even know what prompted me to do it. And I keep saying that because literally only up until a few years ago, I would have been admittedly laughing at a conversation like this. Laughing for what? For what reason? I couldn't have even told you. What is that? It's weird.
I think we're also society supports not looking into something, not mulling something over day after day, night after night. It's like we're being pushed to get our every pleasure whenever we want, get distracted at every moment, like not stay on something and marinate on something and really flesh it out. It's like, let's all be ADD.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, 2020 was also a year where the science thing became more of a cult. And when I say cult, I mean certain people that are just screaming trust the science or wear the mask
while they're crying.
They're doing it from a place of religious fervor. So it's
anger.
Not, it's about it's bigger than themselves.
Obviously contested and wrong as well. I mean,
right.
It's more likely the truth is getting censored, than the science. I mean,
they're saying trust my science, right? It's because it's not even about. It's about the science is just a word that we've substituted for whatever it is that you believe.
But science isn't about religion. These people, when they say trust the science, they're speaking from their heart because they are in that cult.
They're sold. Yeah.
It's about the bigger picture. I'm a hero for social distancing.
I banged pots and pans.
And it's they're it's beyond rationality or reason. It's more just fervorous, people are triggered and they're going deeper into how can I symbolize that I'm believe in #science, or how could I show the world that I trust Dr. Fauci? I'm going to hang a Dr. Fauci ornament on my tree.
Yeah, it's the same people who post a photo of them getting the vaccine. It's it's
people that are it's like churchy ladies, but they're just secular. It's
it's arrogance about their ignorance. We're really really arrogant about how ignorant we are, and I hate saying this, but we've empowered the uninformed.
Yeah.
You can go anywhere and it doesn't matter who it is. Just somebody who's employed there can come up and tell you what you can or cannot do, even though they have zero authority on that. Right. And that's kind of where we're at too. And it's that is straight up scientism. That is religion.
Yeah.
Like you would have people telling you, how morally corrupt you were, when we don't even know how morally corrupt or uncorrupt they were. And that's kind of where we are with that.
Well, we've lost meaning because when you can turn your gender on a dime and identify however you want, and no one can say shit to you, there's a power in that. And I think that's like that kind of bleeds over into other areas.
I think you might be right, Chrissie, on that. You're disassembling our very understanding of the most intimate aspect of life, which is biology, it's different than being, you treat, look, if you there's a way of going about this without being a jerk about it, but that doesn't change a universal truth of anatomy or biology, but it trickles down to other things. They are disassembling our perception of reality via the weaponization of science in order to do so, and they're rewriting science in order to kind of deliver that. You could see that with the change of the definition of herd immunity, and I'm only bringing that up. That's a big. I've already seen people arguing with each other that herd immunity has only been reached through vaccination programs, but that was unbelievable. I've never seen it. Almost as if they've forgotten that 6 months ago they were arguing about the old Boris Johnson article saying herd immunity is a bad idea. Everyone getting infected would suck. Well, don't you just see that you just flipped on a dime, just as you said, Chrissie? So I think that when you weaponize a very intimate part of that changes. It trickles down to everything else. And in the past, it used to be class warfare. It used to be the rich versus the poor, or whatever it might be. But now they're weaponizing our biology against us, which is
Transformers.
I swear to God, and if
form of chick with dick.
You can be anything you want. There's no limits. There's no limits. But
I'm a car now.
I swear to God. Yeah, you
Shout
speak
out to our trans listeners.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a couple. They're wonderful people. But here's the whole thing, dude. I totally agree with you. There's nonlinear warfare going on. And I think memory hold, you said best. I don't know anything. I think, when you take that stance going, I really don't know anything. But if you're asking me what I feel, I think that's the key to everything. And, it's like whenever I see somebody getting into the conspiracy genre of podcasting, I like to have talks with them just kind of so they understand what they're going into. And for me, it's like, don't get lost in the results. Don't you are not here to save anybody. You're here to spread awareness. And the people who want to understand what you're talking about, they will take the tools you're giving them and apply it to their lives. And a lot of people won't. And there's nothing you could do about that. If you try to save everybody and save the world, you're just going to drive yourself crazy, And we see people. There's some people who have, taken their own lives in our genre because it's such a heavy burden. And it's like, what is the point of trying to save the world if you're fucking miserable?
It's true. Yeah, you'll always be disappointed. You have to be content with just seeing. I always say it's like there's people that can look at the grass move that'll never question what's making it move. But, it's like I prefer to see what is underneath the surface. But if you go to that extra layer and say, I expect mass arrests now, you're going to be disappointed. Just forever. Always.
We're asking corrupt people to fix corruption.
Yeah,
and the only way everything changes is by an awakening. It's like somebody put out that, I think, and because I want to believe in hope, that at the end we have this V for Vendetta moment where everybody just marches and together, black, white, straight, gay, male, female, whatever you are, it's like everybody's fighting on their parallel or down. At some point, we're all going to look up and go, oh, this is what's really fucking, there's no trans agenda out there. Trans aren't trying to corrupt the world. They're just trying to have a job where they don't got to sell their ass on the fucking street. You know what I'm saying? There's no power. They have no power.
Right.
But these people want you to think they're there coming for your kids, and stuff like that. Or the Jews run everything. It's not. It's the same. It's like this small group of people getting us all to fight with each other. And when people start to wake up to that and stop fucking arguing with people on their floor or below them, that's where things start to change. And maybe that is where the high frequency beings come in and they start getting us to fucking start seeing that. I think that is what the future is. And that is my hope.
I wanted to see aliens with double genitals. How about that?
Hey, it's been
Dick
great.
Demons?
We gotta
You
go.
want
We
two
gotta
Dick
run, you
Demons?
guys.
Oh, bye,
We gotta run.
Grimerica.
Thanks for inviting
Oh,
us.
I walked them.
America, get the fuck off the show.
you
You're
all.
done. You're
Okay,
off.
see you guys.
You've been voted off this reality show. Thanks for trying. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're down. Now we have 7 contestants left. Who will be UFO expert of the year?
Oh man, oh man, oh
shit.
man.
Wait,
So
you
much
forgot to play
pressure.
the Alex Jones.
Oh yeah, I had him
Oh.
muted.
God bless you. We'll talk to you soon. Great job.
You know, this is what I hear when I close my eyes at night. Good
Well,
night.
no, to bring it back to like trying to convert people or whatever, like I'm actually trying to do the opposite. Like there's people I know. There's people I know who I don't want them to know I have a freaking podcast. Like,
Yeah.
because when we bring up
Yeah.
hashtag science or hashtag trust the science or whatever, like I just go along with it. I'm like, oh, that's what the science said. That's great, you know, because there's just levels of like awakening and
You're protecting yourself in a way.
yeah, I'm gonna go on my show and not hold back, but you know, I don't want to convert. It's not an evangelical conspiracy type situation. Like I'm fine with with fewer people to be speaking with because I don't like dealing with stupid people most of the time.
And that's not gonna be fun for you. It's like this. I imagine this kind of conversation is fun for you because we're all
yeah.
just like watering each other's brains. You know, if you have to do all the work, if you've got to, you should meet somebody 50-50, 60-40. If you're meeting somebody 100 and they're bringing 0, God, that's exhausting.
Yeah, and there's people that are like, oh, like you get the invitation in. They're like, well, what do you really think about this? I'm like, oh, now that you asked, I'll tell you. But
Right.
most of the people that don't do that, I just let them be, you know.
I think that's the best way because you're protecting your own sanity in that sense because you're going to be infinitely disappointed, just like hoping for whatever it might be, mass arrest, mass disclosure, infinite disappointment if it doesn't happen your way. You'll also reach the same level of frustration if you constantly try to either force this thing on people. It's better to, number one, if they're interested and they ask you, go ahead and let loose in whatever way possible. My own branding of it is when I produce videos, I try and make it in such a way where if the people seek it out, the videos will be a good representation of how they themselves can replicate the steps in how I found that evidence. Am I going to force that down their throats? No. However, if they ever have their curiosity piqued, they'll be able to view my presentations, and you guys might take a similar style where they'll realize it's empowering to say, oh, I can find that myself, and that's awfully shady, it's awfully suspicious. So I don't go around talking about as much as I can. But if they were to somehow miraculously find my work online, I think it's a very good objective. Boring, mind you, I go across more of a lecture type of thing, but that's how you have to do it. You know, you can't always add a flash or some pizzazz to it. It is what it is. It takes a lot of research and work to know everything you guys know. You didn't just learn it in a second. This is years of work, and we can't expect everyone to just jump to it right away because we said, but look at this piece of evidence. It's like they're not looking into it. So the best you can do, in my opinion, is just leave that door open. Come on in anytime. And you have to make sure that your house is orderly, AKA the information is solid, it's tight, and it's non-debunkable. And they'll see that for themselves. And if they do try to debunk it or criticize it, they'll be criticizing it on a level that's not addressing the evidence. They'll be criticizing it on, oh, your videos are boring. Yeah, I know. That's kind of the point. You know what I mean? What do you think of the info?
Or just make them do Sam's podcast because that's what ruined me forever.
And you with many, I bet.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
Oh yeah, you came on and talked about Battle of Los Angeles. So I want to ask the guys here and the ladies who are folk who know a lot about aliens. How many alien types do you think we've come in contact with over the time? You've always seen people break them down. There's these types, there's these types. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? The
I've
different
like
types there
7
are?
or 8 types.
That's a good question.
I mean, I hear
Thank you.
a lot of the sources of this are from like really kind of old school ufology. Like I've seen like old diagrams where they show like the reptilians, then like the Nordics, then there's like the feline kind. So like, okay, I'm thinking like, is this like fan fiction and just like fantasy, or is this based off people's real experiences? But I mean, even when you think about like people that smoke DMT, like how many types of entities do they see? It's kind of hard to nail down. But
I spoke with Kate Awakening, and I've been meaning to listen to more of her live streams, but I did an episode with her, and she said there's like just about an alien species for every animal species on Earth, like just about like that many, which is hard to wrap your mind around, but exciting because I think about like a golden doodle maybe species, like something I could pet, you know?
Yeah, it's not so bad. Yeah, there could be a lot out there. You look at like,
go get the ball, alien.
yeah, they like from previous. I mean, I think the two that we hear most of is like grays being one, regardless of what they are, and then you've got the old like 50s, 60s. What's the name of it? Galactic Federation, maybe, where it's like the Nordics or something like that, where there's lots of eyewitness accounts of like those two. Those two stand out to me. Then you've got what's the Canadian? He was a he was in power. Was it a former prime minister?
He was a Canadian defense minister. He said there's 56 different species.
Right.
Imagine just Canadians are a species.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's camouflage.
Just all Canadians.
It's not a bad point because, like, there's a lot of UFO encounters. A lot of people who have been abducted who said, you ran into a gray, but looks like the grays were controlled by the insectoids, and then they were talking to the reptilians, and then they brought in a robot. And it's like you got like a party going on. Who's in charge of who? Are they all part of the same hierarchy, or are they truly different species? It's tough to tell, but I think commonly there's probably like 10 prominent ones, and then there's like little offshoots of like little blobs that somebody saw but aren't really in popular
I think
culture.
I've heard too that the grays, there will be like 10 short grays and then like the queen or something.
Yeah.
There's like a taller one.
Like the Borg queen, yeah.
Oh my God, a sitcom, Grey's Anatomy, a reboot, but with just aliens.
All gray aliens.
There it is. Pitch it. Get it pitched.
The hot girls. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Paul Heller was his name. That just dawned on me. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, there's then if they're shape shifting, we're all fucked. God knows what they can turn into, if that's actually has any inkling of truth.
Well, yeah, I have the sense that a lot of them are, like I kind of said earlier, are like in the astral realm or something. And even if they are interacting with us and there might be physical symptoms or evidence or something, it just seems like, you know, it's kind of like when you were talking about your experience, Mike, about like having the sense that there was someone in the room with you. Like I've had that with sleep paralysis, and that's kind of the feeling like, okay, I'm not in my physical body, but I have this other body and I'm standing in the room, and what the fuck is that over there? So I don't know. I think it goes beyond just our 3D world.
Yeah. There is something to be said, because Mike knows that it wasn't a dream, but let's take the examples of like what you just said, sleep paralysis. There's two things that are like iconic with sleep paralysis, and that's the idea of like a presence there in the room with you, and that presence takes multiple different forms. Is it real? Is it your imagination just in that sleep mode? It's hard to say. So it's always very difficult to take abduction stories that originate from a sleep-like state, like a hypnagogic-like state, very seriously. But again, I'll probably say for the 100th time this time, can't afford to say that, not going to read about it. But there is that presence there where I agree with you. I mean, there could be all varieties, and you see some of that with, you know, the astral realm stories of people ingesting DMT, or even just simple as sleep paralysis. You know, it comes in all shapes and sizes.
Well, and like Sam was talking about, divide and conquer, you know, all these people fighting among each other over, you know, nonsense. You hear astronauts talk about how when they see Earth from space, like there's something that happens to them. They're psychologically, it makes them, it forces them to realize how insignificant everything is. You know, like the whole history of the world, all the Roman Empire, every war battle that's ever happened on this small, what looks like a small little planet from space. I think it kind of puts things in perspective. So I think, when you're talking about the battle between either it's religious people or people who are into supernatural stuff or whatever, and the elite, I think it's in the elite's favor to keep us looking at things from a material perspective. It's in, it's like everything, it is simple. It can be explained. Trust us. We'll tell you. And they've almost redefined science, because nothing has dug more graves for theories than science. Science constantly keeps reinventing and debunking itself over and over and over again, but yet now we're kind of brainwashed to believe that science is this right now. What we believe right now is science, and this doesn't change. And it's like, no, that's very unscientific of you to even say that, because science is constantly changing. It's constantly reevaluating itself. It's constantly, James Corbett had a great short documentary called The Crisis of Science, and it really goes into, one thing that it talked about, and I don't know the specific statistic, but a huge percentage of scientific studies can't be redone. Like it's like 70 or 80% of them or something like that. They get it published, it's considered science, and then somebody tries to recreate it and they can't. So what does that tell you? So we end up putting our faith, and this goes back into religion, right? We put our faith into it, and yet we just believe that this person with this PhD or this white robe, similar to a priest, right? Like this idea that like a priest has this moral compass beyond our understanding. Like they're a superior human than us. Like we kind of look at scientists as the same way, Dr. Fauci, whoever it may be, like they can't be corrupted. Like they can't have other intentions or be a poor person, a moral person, So, they've done a great job tricking us into believing that science is this thing that it really isn't, and that these people who believe in science or are selling you the science are on this pedestal where morally they're a better person, they're smarter, they're more intelligent, and you put your faith in them. So it's amazing how you think all these things aren't intertwined, and they are all intertwined.
I think we need to make merch shirts that say "Don't trust the science." Union of the Unwanted.
Oh, that's a great shirt.
There you go.
Good idea.
There you go. It's not a bad idea.
There we go. Let's make that.
Or mistrust the science. Yeah.
I
love you guys so much. Everybody on here, I'd love to do shows with you. So let's make that happen. Great show today. Ricky, great job. Booking, great job. Midnight Mike, always a pleasure. Charlie. Cosmic Key, man, I don't know your name. I just see your thing, but man, fun talking to you. Always memory hole.
Man.
And
I'm a big
Chrissie,
fan of your show too, Sam. So
well, let's set something up. We'll all talk, man. I'd love to podcast with everybody. I love you guys very much. Sorry to be dramatic about my exit, but I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon.
We're all getting out of here. Everyone check the links in the description of this video. I'll update them tomorrow with links to everyone's podcast and also the podcast. If you just search for the Union of the Unwanted on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever kind of podcast app, we will show up. And so you can check out other people's podcasts by following links. Yeah, and follow the Twitter too.
Twitter, Instagram, Float. We're on Float. YouTube, Odyssey.
What's Float?
Float. Were you late? I thought
it's Float app.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't know either, Chrissie.
FLOTE.
You kids and your apps. Yeah.
But thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks everybody for the conversation. This was a fun change to some of the other topics we've been constantly hitting, but we found some type of relation to some of the stuff we've been talking about. So I think it's an important topic, and hopefully everybody has a great end of the year, and hopefully we'll all connect again in 2021 when it's a little better than 2020.
Yeah, I hope so.
Look, Chrissie.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. And this was a ton of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. I appreciate the invite too, and I appreciate all the viewers that were checking us out. And be sure to follow Union of the Unwanted, guys. We'll do this again.
Plug your shows. Actually, I'll give you guys the chance to plug your show where they can connect with you guys if they want to.
Sure. I am currently on YouTube. I'm Memory Hold 2.0. I'm focusing on DLive and BitChute under the same name. So go ahead and follow me there if you're interested. Facts only. Objectivity is the way to go. And that's kind of where I'm at. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Chrissie.
No. I was trying to figure out if you said memory hole or memory hold, but it's hold.
Yeah.
I just subscribed to you.
Nice.
Okay, cool. Chrissie Mayr podcast on all the things, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. I have a good episode with Sam Tripoli. I have a good episode recently with Ricky that just came out. Good blend of conspiracy folks, comedians, porn stars, anyone who's interesting, really. And then, yeah, follow me at Chrissie Mayr on all the things.
Yeah, and I'm the Cosmic Keys podcast. You can find my show on YouTube and wherever podcasts are available.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Sweet.
Thanks, guys. Hey, have a great night and enjoy the rest of your year. And I'm sure we'll reconnect soon. And I'll send you guys the links, though.
You guys as well. Thank
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
He's a man.